So there are a lot of Pokemon that rely on moves that miss a lot. The biggest one for my money would be Tornadus T. Torn T uses Hurricane, uses Focus Blast. I don't like using Pokemon like that because they just seem really hit or miss. Literally, they're hit or miss. Another option for a Pokemon like that would be something like Shaman Skyform, who, in addition to using Air Slash and Seed Flare that both miss, it also relies on its flinch chance, which is not the greatest. I mean, 60% chance to flinch could seem pretty broken, but that also means you have a 40% chance not to flinch, and when you have pretty low defenses in the Ubers tier, I don't like that. On the flip side of that equation, we have Pokemon that have moves that never miss, or at least don't normally miss, and it's Smogon rules because they don't usually have evasion raises allowed. Yeah, these moves just never miss, and so that means that I can click a move and I know that I'll be getting off damage no matter what. And that really appeals to me. This can make for some more boring gameplay, but we could also view that as being more consistent gameplay. And the Pokemon for me that epitomizes this is Kartana. Kartana comes with a whole bevy of moves, and they all are pretty low base power, but because Kartana is so strong, he doesn't care, and they never miss. So Leaf Blade, Knockoff, Secret Sword, Smart Strike. You could also toss on Aerial Ace if you're feeling cheeky, or maybe Psycho Cut if you are playing draft. None of these moves are going to miss. It's really nice to be able to use a Pokemon like that you just know, hey, all my moves, they're always going to hit. Not because I have some ability that's going to aid me in always hitting. No, they just always hit because they're all in 100% accuracy. And I don't have any better options. If I did, I'd be broken. There's some other Pokemon that have options to run fully hittable movesets as well. Tapu Koko has a standard moveset of Electric Move, Dazzling Gleam, U-Turn, or Volt Switch, Taunt, Roost, Defog, whatever it wants to run. I just tossed most of these Pokemon straight into a team from the import-export. Just go over here, click a button, and then call it a day. So not much thought went into this team, but hey, I just thought what Pokemon have moves that don't miss, and basically what they're known for running. They just always are going to be hitting, and Koko is a good example of that. This particular Koko has U-Turn over Volt Switch and has Thunderbolt over some other support move or whatever. I like that. It's pretty nice to be able to click Thunderbolt, but sometimes it might be nice to have Volt Switch, but you don't want to have two electric moves, so this is a pretty good compromise for that. But I don't like having to click my electric stab and switch out at the same time, so I like having Thunderbolt. Urshifu is another Pokemon that really is no nonsense, doesn't miss its moves, and what's better is that not only does it not miss its moves, but you can even protect stall it, so it just comes in and it will always get damage off at the end of the turn, which is really good. So it's got 4 moves. These are basically the only ones I ever see, and we're just running Choice Bandit because my Kartana is Choice Scarf, which is my preferred Kartana. Slowking, Galarian Slowking specifically, also has a lot of moves that it likes to run, and basically none of them ever miss either. So really nice to toss Slowking on the team. Unfortunately, it doesn't get teleport, or maybe fortunately, if you don't like it. And it gives us a nice spit off wall for this team, which is good. Unfortunately, it doesn't give us a good ghost resist, but neither would normal Slowking, so we'll take it. Then we've got our defensive pivots, which are Lando and Corviknight. Of course, Landorus has all sorts of moves that can miss, especially Toxic, so we're going to avoid that particular option. I could run Defog on it, but I don't need to run Defog on Lando if I have Corviknight. And I could have run Knockoff, and in fact, a lot of games I really wish I had ran Knockoff. In fact, I don't think I ever clicked Smackdown, so Knockoff probably would be better. But I was thinking, oh, well, I already have Knockoff on Kartana. I don't want to double up Knockoff users because I like to have a strong Knockoff so I can get 2 KOs, get my Beast Boost, get sweeping. But probably Knockoff would be better over Smackdown, just from what I experienced. This is just the standard defensive spread that you can get when you click the button 241 lets speed Heatran Magma Zones. They usually hit 240 or whatever that is. I forget exactly what it is, but I just know that 241 is usually good. The only sad part is that a lot of times you'll outspeed other Landos on the U-turn, and then you lose momentum that way. Finally, Corviknight. Corviknight can run Body Press as well, or Ironhead if you're feeling really weird. I like the Brave Bird option currently. You just regret it when you're in a Tyranitar, but there's no Bisharp, and really you'll only need it for T-Tar, and I like having Brave Bird so that I can hit Landos stronger, and then all the rest of its moves don't miss. So, not really the most inspired team, but I just thought I'd throw together a team that every single move always hits, and make that the theme, which I think is, while not the most interesting theme, is somewhat unique. So let's get into our first replay. Alright, so for this first game, we see our opponent has 3 pink mons, plus some threats in the back. This team has pretty decent pivots. It's got, in fact, these 2 plus these 2 are basically usually ran as more defensive options, and the middle 2 are the offense. So I'm not going to go out and call this stall, but this is bulky offense at best. So it's going to be a little bit difficult for my team to break. I don't have a lot of really just offensive, potent powerhouses that are going to give my opponent no switch-ins. One thing to note is Lando is a bit of a problem for this team in terms of getting it dead. Corviknight, of course, sort of denies much of what Lando wants to do, so that's not a big issue. But unfortunately, besides Urshifu, the rest of my team sort of gets bopped by Lando, so I have to watch out for that. Anyway, when it comes to the lead matchup, I say, alright, Coco versus this team. It obviously doesn't like Lando, but I have good switch-ins to Lando, and I want to know if the Landorus is Choice Scarf. And I can find that out if I lead Coco, because my Electric Train should normally go off first before Intimidate, but if it's Choice Scarf, of course, it will get off Intimidate first. Heatran, I have a passable switching with my Galarian Slowking, and I can pop a balloon if I U-turn out or whatever. If he leads with Urshifu, I should be probably fine. Of course, if it's Scarf, I guess that's somewhat of an issue, but I wasn't really thinking about that. Similarly with Lele, I want to know if Lele's Choice Scarf, so we'll see whose train goes off first, and I don't care at all about Blissey or Slowbro, so I figured Coco is a pretty decent lead matchup, so that's what I decided to go with. And so I lead with Coco. He leads off with Landorus. You see that the Intimidate goes off second, so he's not Choice Scarf, so I can freely U-turn out, scout his item, so that's what I decided to do. I U-turn out, and I decided to go into my own Landorus to get off the Intimidate, and he decides to click the knockoff. Now, in retrospect, looking back on it, going Landorus on his Landorus was not the greatest idea. I sort of want to keep my leftovers at all possible, or not get toxicked, or whatever. And Corviknight doesn't care about toxic. If it gets knocked off, that's sad, but it has Roost, so it doesn't care so much about getting knocked off. And I think Corviknight would have been just overall a better play. My Landorus, if it wants to even hit his Landorus, has to click Smackdown into Earthquake, whereas my Corviknight can just Brave Bird, and that's super simple. The one good thing my Landorus does do is outspeed his Heatran, so we can't go into it, and we'll see later on that is one of the downsides of Corviknight being out, is that is not offensively scaring out Landorus. And if Lando U-turns, it can just U-turn into Heatran. And if my Corviknight needs to do anything else like Roost, that could be a problem, whereas Landorus just outspeeds it. The other reason I went into Landorus this turn was because I wanted to get out my own Stealth Rock. So I go into my Landorus, get knocked off, and I can sit on my Stealth Rock. He decides to U-turn out. He's going to U-turn into Slowbro. I decide to scout to see if it's Rocky Helmet by U-turning, and unfortunately it is Rocky Helmet. So we'll go into our top of Coco. He decides to Ice Beam. It's sort of a funky play. You don't usually see Ice Beam Bro, but it is sometimes ran, especially for Dragonite, and so I'm going to watch out for that. Fortunately, I do not get frozen here. And so I know he's not going to stay in. I U-turn out. He decides to go Heatran, and I'm like, that's weird. I go into my Landorus to scare him out, and now he's going to not want to stay in, obviously, and I decide to Earthquake because I don't know if my opponent is good or not, and I need to scout his skill level. So, especially because I feel like I've seen a lot of people stay in with their Heatrans on Landorus is not respect them, but this guy does, and so I actually lose all my momentum because of that. And if I had decided to U-turn out, I would have gotten momentum against this Landorus, and I could have actually gotten to my Urshifu, or my Kartana, or anything like that. So it's a bit unfortunate that I decided to Earthquake, but it is what it is. Here I decide to U-turn. I think I'm just naturally faster than this Landorus, and I know he's not going to Earthquake me because I'm a dang Landorus. He doesn't know what my last move is. It could be toxic or anything, so he doesn't know that I'm going to switch out. There's no way he's going to Earthquake. Now I want to go into my Tapu Koko just to see if he U-turns out on his own. He does not, unfortunately, so now I need to switch again back into my Landorus. And once again, I'm going to take a knockoff. Unfortunately, my Landorus is being pretty whittled, and his is not taking any damage. I click Stealth Rock on his U-turn. He goes back into Slowbro. Here, once again, I'm going to click U-turn. I know I'm going to take Chip. I just don't want to get my ankles broken as he decides to pull a double. So at this point, I go back in Tapu Koko, and I know that he can go into Landorus, but again, I think, well, what if he decides to be cheeky? And so I decide to click Thunderbolt. So, unfortunately, once again, I've lost more momentum. He decides to U-turn instead of defogging this turn, which is a little bit funny. He goes into Heatran. I switched into Corviknight this turn, first of all because Corviknight does switch in passively to Landorus, but also because I can count and I know future sight's coming. But this is the first interaction you'll see with Corviknight and Heatran. Since he U-turned on my Corviknight, now his Heatran is going to outspeed me. Maybe fortunately for me, he decides to click Stealth Rock instead this turn, so I'll have to take the necessary chip on my Slowking. Here, I decide to click Future Sight on my own. I figured he's probably not going to stay in with Heatran, and I might as well do the same thing to him that he just did to me. At this point, I've sort of wisened up a bit, and I'm like, wait a second, my Landorus is getting chipped, his Landorus isn't taking any damage. This is an inequivalent exchange, I need to do something about it. My Corviknight doesn't care about getting knocked off, because it has Roost. I should be going to my Corviknight instead, which I think is what I should have been doing almost from the get-go. Maybe getting up Stealth Rock is fine, but after that, I should be using Corviknight more. He turns out, and he decides to go back into his Heatran once again, which once again means that I am disadvantageous. It also helps him because he can take his own Future Sight. Misses Magma Storm, which is fine. I'll take that. And at this point, I decide to click Scald to say, hey, what's up? I'm here, but now I figure he's going to switch, so I decide to click Future Sight. He clicks Earth Power instead, which is sort of funny. But fortunately for me, he's not a Trapper set, so I don't really care. I click Scald again just in case he decides to be a Trapper set. I get the burn, does not matter. He goes for Thunder Wave on my switch to Corviknight. I go Corviknight here because I don't know what he's going to try to do here, but Corviknight's got Roost, and so it's fine no matter what he does. Now that I think about it, probably a good thing that I went to Corviknight because, hey, Thunder Wave, that's a problem. And of course I was never going to hard switch in my Urshifu. Thunder Wave is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it does mean that I risk getting full paired in the turns to come, but it also means now I am much slower than his Fat Mons, which means I get slow U-turns on just about everything on this team, which is really helpful. I don't get it this turn though because I get that full pair. He decides to switch out, gets his Natural Cure, but now I get to use my slow U-turn to bring Adamon. Now I could have gone into Urshifu here, and I do. This is a bit of a risk because he has Slowbro, but scaring out the Landorus and beating up just about everything else in the back is sort of my main goal. So I figure he's going to go into Slowbro here, so I'm not going to use to kill the Landorus, I'm going to U-turn out. And after one or two of these interactions, the Slowbro should be pretty low. There's absolutely no way I'm going to Searching Strikes while this Rocky Helmet Slowbro is here, obviously as said. Kartana is a nice switch in now over top of Koko because Koko just lets back in Landorus. Before we weren't able to bring in the Kartana because it was having to come in on an attack, but now his Kartana is coming in freely, and so now I can bring it in and actually threaten his team offensively. Now knockoff is relatively safe, even if I knock off the Urshifu, who cares? So I'm going to knock off the Landorus. Now finally it gets rid of its leftovers, but I'm not going to 2KO it, so I need to save this, switch out, go back into Corviknight. He decides to knock off again, which means I lost my leftovers. I need to stay somewhat healthy, so I'm going to roost up here, because I want to make sure that I can once again check the Landorus. He clicks Future Sight on my slow pivot U-turn again, and I get to go back into Kartana to click another knockoff. This should 2KO Landorus, and so that's fine by me. So I get to click another knockoff here, except for whatever reason I didn't click knockoff. I think maybe because I figured he would go into Urshifu. That might have been the reason that I made that play. Sort of a funny play. He clicks knockoff. Once again, oh yeah, that's right. It's because of the Future Sight. Let's see, I was counting when I was playing the game. So I didn't want to take the Future Sight. Alright, he's going to turn out. I'm going to roost up here. And it goes into Tapu Lele. That's right. And so now I decide at this point, you know what, my Corviknight, it's useful. It gets those slow pivots, but what would be more useful to me is to get this Tapu Lele damaged and to scout out what it's going to do. It decides to click Moonblast, which is a play against my team. I feel like it would have been a lot stronger to hit any of your psychic moves, because what does my team have for a psychic move? I feel like it was just way stronger overall. The Moonblast, I have no clue why they clicked Moonblast, but it doesn't really matter either way. I click Brave Bird, get off the damage with this Tapu Lele. With the Brave Bird chip, that's enough to KO me, and that's why it didn't really matter what he did. Here I get to go to Kartana, and he's going to sack his Landorus. Don't get my Beast Boost, but I also don't get intimidated, so it's a net neutral. He used to scout me out though. He doesn't lock into knockoff, so he can go into Urshifu. First, he clicks Close Combat here, and while I know that I was just in with my Kartana and Searching Strikes doesn't make too much sense, he also is not going to take any damage from a knockoff, so I don't know why he decided to click Close Combat. But it doesn't really matter because he will 2KO me. It's not really like I want to switch in with this, but now he is -2 on both his defenses for whatever that's worth. I go here into Tapu Koko, I can take Close Combat for days, and I'm just going to turn out. No problemo. I go back into Kartana, and here is where I could have gone to Urshifu, but he still had that Slowbro. And the Slowbro was pretty dang healthy, so I didn't want to go into that. Kartana getting its free knockoffs is much more enticing to me. So I'm going to click knockoff. I guess you can make some argument that he should have sacked his Blissey, but he decides to go hard into Heatran, and I click Leaf Blade here, predicting him to predict the knockoff and go into Urshifu. Was that the best play? I don't know. Maybe not. Clearly did not work out here. I go into my Galarian Slowking though, which is my dedicated Heatran answer. And this is going to allow me to click Future Sight here, and then I'm going to click Scalds until I die. Unfortunately, because of the way I counted these turns, it actually will come in just the right time. And it gets some good damage off on the Heatran, and because the Magma Storm will die this turn, so now I get to go to my Kartana. Now I can click Knockoff safely, because if he goes into his Urshifu, he'll die to Future Sight. So now the Heatran is gone and now Leaf Blade is free. Of course I have to switch out here, that's fair enough. I go to Tapu Koko, he decides to click Close Combat again, and I'm like, oh good, well I'll just, Thunderbolt and kill him. Turns out he is Choice Scarf, so a bit unfortunate there, but that also means I know this Choice Scarf. I'm Choice Scarf myself, and he does not respect that, and he decides to sack his Urshifu. And at this point, I'm +1, and the Bliss is going to die to Leaf Blade as well, and that's GG. So overall, I think the hardest part with this game was the initial breaking of his team. That Landorus plus Slowbro plus Heatran core was really difficult for me to break in the beginning. But once I figured to use the Corviknight over the Landorus, that really helped. And then I think that my opponent made a couple of plays that sort of let me get enough chip so that Kartana can sweep in the end, which is what we were aiming for from the start. Alright, on to game 2. This team is sort of interesting. We see an Arachnid, we see him on top, pretty uncommon mons to see, and even Mew is a somewhat uncommon occurrence in the LU metagame at the moment. So I decide to lead off with my Corviknight, because if you look at his team, obviously if he has webs, I want to keep those off, and Corviknight's a really good option for that. Hit him on top as well is really good with Corviknight, and Landorus. From the last game we sort of learned, hey, use Corviknight for Landorus, so I might as well lead off with Corviknight just in case he decides to do anything funky with webs. Decides to lead with Mew, that's fine by me. I predicted him to taunt or something. I'm going to click U-turn. I want to scout and see if he has an eject pack or eject button or something like that. And I figure, taunt is somewhat likely. I have absolutely no clue why he would taunt, because he hadn't set up hazards. But it's also possible he has nothing to touch Corviknight with, and he just doesn't want me to bulk up on him turn 1, which, would have been a major issue for this team. So he taunts, I U-turn out, and I get to go into Kartana. Click knock off because nothing appreciates getting knocked off, and he goes into his Ferrothorn, which is going to lose his leftovers. Oh, it's not going to stay in. Here I decide to go into a Shifu, which is somewhat of a bold prediction, but there's no way he's going to Power Whip, and I guess he could have Thunder Waved that turn. That would have been an issue. But if you look at his team and you look at my Urshifu is nice for the Landorus, but he's got an Arachnid. Arachnid actually is sort of a good Urshifu answer unless it's got Thunder Punch, which mine does not. So Urshifu doesn't do much against that. He's got a Mew, which also Urshifu somewhat can struggle against depending on the set. He's got a Dragapult, which means that I'm going to be required to predict between Surging Strikes and Close Combat, which really neuters its effectiveness, and hit him on top, which can intimidate it, which, against Surging Strikes doesn't matter, but against Close Combat does. And so I decide, don't really care too much about Urshifu this game. And I do want to maybe scare out the Ferrothorn ASAP. So here, I say there's absolutely no way he stays in with this Ferrothorn. I'm going to predict his Landorus to come in, or his Dragapult, and I think the Surging Strikes. His Lando comes in and dies to the Surging Strikes. So here he goes into Dragapult. Here I get a little lost in the sauce, and I figure, well, he's probably not going to stay in with his Dragapult, because I've got a Tapu Koko, which can eat Draco Meteors, and why he wouldn't go for Shadow Ball is beyond me. But once again, I figure, don't really need Urshifu. So I'm going to predict him to switch out with U-turn, and that's as far as my thinking went. I didn't get to the next step, which is, okay, so he's going to U-turn out, but then he's going to go into Ferrothorn, and I'm going to take tons of chip damage from the Iron Barbs. So I got half of that equation right and half that equation wrong, but it's fine because I was sacking their Shifu anyway. That being said, decided to switch out. Might as well keep a sack if I can. I'm going to go into Landorus because I figure he's not going to click anything too funny. I want to get up rocks, so I'm going to do that. He's got his hit on top, but they're not going to run max speed Jolly, so I'm going to outspeed it. Not too worried about not outspeeding it. So I get to switch out, and he's going to rapid spin away the rocks, which fair enough. Now, if you look at his team, you look at my Corviknight, he has absolutely nothing for Brave Bird switch-ins now. So I'm going to Brave Bird now, and I'm still not scared of this Mew, so I'm just going to turn out on it. I get a crit, which on fort, who cares? I get to go to Tapu Koko. The reason I go to Tapu Koko is because I don't want Arachnid coming out and setting up Sticky Web. I don't want Dragapult coming out and dictating the pace of the match. Him on top isn't that big of a deal, but it is what it is. I know that I'm not scared of Ferrothorn though, and I want to make Ferrothorn come out. So I'm going to go into Tapu Koko. He has to go Ferrothorn, and I'm just going to hard switch. Not going to bother taking chip for the 2% I'll do to the Ferrothorn with a U-turn. So I'm going to hard switch into my Corviknight. I can defog away the rocks. He decides to Leech Seed, which is fair, and he's going to get up to a pretty decent amount of health after I've defogged here. He Thunder Waves, which means this is the second time in as many games as my Corviknight got Thunder Waved. Here I decide to U-turn, maybe he's going to switch out. He decides not to. I decide to go into Slowking. I don't have any problem sacking my Slowking at this point, because Slowking doesn't do anything. He's got Araquanid, which has a pretty good Dispidef stat, and of course usually has bug moves, liquidation, so Slowking doesn't like those. He's got Dragapult, which Slowking is the Spidef wall, but the one thing it can't Spidef is Specs Shadow Balls from Dragapult, so it's not like it's doing much of that regard either. And Hitmontop, it is nice to resist the fighting moves, but it's not going to resist much other than that on the physical side. So the one thing Slowking can do is Flamethrower and take body presses. Apparently, he decides to switch out to Scout for Flamethrower, and I go for it. He can't burn the Arachnid, unfortunately. I'm gonna go into Corviknight because I don't want him to set up Sticky Web. He sets up a substitute, and I'm like, what? But one thing I do know is we want that substitute gone. He decides to set up an infestation on me, but I don't think I'm trapped with him, he's trapped with me. If I had had nicknames on, I would have seen this nickname, and then maybe that would have clued me in, but I don't have nicknames on when I'm playing. I Brave Bird again because I don't want him to set up another substitute. He could have tried to stay and play off of Volpera or whatever. I don't know what he could have done because it's probably sub-infestation, toxic, rest, or some nonsense. But I decided to Brave Bird just in case anyway. Here I know he's shown body press, but he's not that strong. I'm just going to rest up, and he decides to set up another Leech Seed, which I am just fine with. I'm going to go into Galarian Slowking again because once again it's not doing anything. He clicks another Thunder Wave. Here I believe I go to Tapu Koko. The reason is because I already showed the Flamethrower, and so I figure, hey, it's going to go back into Arachnid, and I can get some nice electric damage off. Or he'll go into this, and I can Dazzling Gleam. I'm not playing around with Dragapult, so I'm just going to click Dazzling Gleam. It does not help too much, but sure, whatever. Ferrothorn comes in. Here I make a bit of a bold prediction, and this probably wasn't the best play because he could have clicked Body Press, I suppose. But I said, hey, he's almost certainly going to click Leech Seed. I've shown my switch in the past 2 times, getting Leech Seed off. Seems like an easy play. I'm going to go into Kartana and block that, and I can click Sacred Sword. And so I do, but unfortunately I don't get the KO, which is really unfortunate. He's almost able to kill me, but not quite, and that's the important part, because I want to keep this Kartana for Dragapult. Dragapult is really fast, but not as fast as Scarf Cart, and clicking Knockoff is free and easy on Dragapult. So I could have, of course, killed the Ferrothorn here, but it would have been double down, and I would have gotten a lot less out of that trade compared to him. So I'm going to switch into my Corviknight, because I don't really care. He clicks Body Press here, doesn't do too much. And at this point, I'm done with this Super Ferrothorn. I'm going to Brave Bird it and kill it. And now at this point, he's going to go into his Dragapult, which is fair enough. I'm going to go into my Slowking because my Corviknight still has value, whereas my Galarian Slowking has absolutely no value. He gets a full pair here, which means I don't get to fish for Sludge Bomb poisons, but that's fine, because at this point, I just want to go to Tapu Koko. I'm going to click Dazzling Gleam, because Dazzling Gleam plus Thunderbolt, he has no switch-ins for that. So I'm going to click Thunderbolt here, and he's able to live because of his good Spadef, and it clicks Toxic, but he's still in range of the second Dazzling Gleam, so I click that. It's nice and safe. Now if he had had Hex here, then he would have killed me, but Shadow Ball does not kill me, and I'm able to get off my Dazzling Gleam, and it kills him. That's a double down, and so now I get to go into my Landorus to intimidate his Hitmontop, so now Hitmontop will be very weak. I just get off a Meteor Earthquake, which that's way too much damage I have to bring for Hitmontop, but I guess he's not intimidated, he's Technician, so I'm still pretty strong. And I just finish it off with an Aqua Jet. Overall, this was a pretty decent game on my end. My opponent had a really unconventional team. I think his Arachnid didn't get to do too much. I think if it had been a different set, it would have been better. The Hitmontop is but the rest of the mons, fair enough. But I thought I played that game decently, so I'm pretty pleased with that. Alright, on to the final game. So in this last game, my opponent loaded up nothing but monsters and threats. His team is going to be really hard to switch into. My team is basically focused around Volturn into sweeping with some late game sweepers with the guys on the left, and my opponent's team is just a lot of really heavy hard hitters with Rillaboom and Dragapult and Melmetal, and to a lesser extent Torn and Landorus. So overall, it can be really hard to switch into my opponent's team, and if I get too much damage too quickly, then that'll be really detrimental. So I have to sort of set the pace of the game. I decide to leave off with Coco because Coco can scout speed tiers against Lando, and it threatens out the Dragapult and the Torn and the Pex, and I have Melmetal Lando for I have Corviknight Lando for the Melmetal, and I have Corviknight as well for the Rillaboom. So Coco is a fairly safe lead. I want to scout and see what my opponent does. Here he decides to lead off with Tornadus, which means that he's already on the back foot, and so I can safely just U-turn out into whatever I want. I'm going to go into Urshifu. Now he does have a Toxapex, which is just about as bad as a Slowbro, so I'm just going to U-turn out. Fortunately, this one does not have a Rocky Helmet. I'm going to go right back to top of Coco. I'm going to scout my opponent's skill level, see if he decides to stay in, but no, he makes a good play, goes into Landorus. Here I decide to U-turn. If he had been Choice Scarf, that would have been a bad idea, but, whatever. I decide to U-turn, and fortunately it's not Choice Scarf, and I get off the Intimidate. He decides to U-turn out of his own, and he goes into Rillaboom, which is, an issue for Landorus, but not too big of an issue, because I am part flying type, so it's just a neutral hit if he decides to go for Grassy Glide. And since he knows that I have a Corviknight, him clicking Grassy Glide isn't necessarily the most likely option. And U-turn is pretty strong move just because it's super effective. Gonna get off a decent chunk on Rillaboom, and Rillaboom is a threat against this team, so I want to get a chip on it. Corviknight is gonna beat out the Rillaboom, so I'm gonna U-turn out. It's another safe option. Here, I decide that I'm gonna click Close Combat. The reason to click Close Combat there, over predicting the Toxapex, is that if I over predict, then I'm going to lose my Urshifu, right? Melmetal has free and safe Thunder Punches and Double Iron Bashes that are just gonna heck up my Urshifu. So even though Close Combat is a really scary move, if he decides to predict me, to predict his Toxapex, then I would just lose straight up that Mon. Whereas here, all I lose is momentum, which losing momentum against Toxapex isn't the worst thing. So Close Combat there is, I think, the correct play. Now we see the damage. It's a 3-hit KO, but Grass is training us up, so it's not really going to be a 3-hit KO. So we're going to go into top of Coco here, take the Scald. Doesn't burn me, which is nice. Once again, he's got that Landorus, so we don't want to stand on that one. I can just U-turn into the Urshifu, and I'm keeping up a decent amount of momentum here. I can click U-turn here, go to top of Coco. But even with this momentum, it's not like I'm getting much done, right? My opponent's just getting leftovers recovering his Landorus, getting regenerated recovery, and he's probably thinking, oh, what the heck, he's wasting my time. And really, to some extent, I suppose I am. But it is what it is. Here we turn out again, go to top of Coco, and here my electric train wears out, and I say, well, maybe he's going to think, well, now I tank the Thunderbolt. So I decide to Thunderbolt again, just in case he decided to stay in. He does not. So I've lost momentum, unfortunately. I can U-turn out. We saw already that I outsped. I'll go back into Lando, because I figured, hey, I can get up Stealth Rock. There, he decides to Earthquake, thinking that maybe I'll stay in. I don't know why I would have stayed in. I don't get much from staying in, even if I predict something to come in. So I really don't know why he didn't U-turn there. If he'd U-turned there, he would have been in a lot better position. But he decided not to. So now, at this point, I can get up Stealth Rock, which is what I wanted. He Toxics, which is fair enough. My Landorus is somewhat useful, but I'd rather have Rocks up to punish all the switches. I'm going to go to Corviknight, which we saw does beat Landorus. He's going to switch out, goes into Melmetal. Now Melmetal has Thunder Punch and Ice Punch, but it has to predict. I clicked Brave Bird here. Not exactly sure why I clicked Brave Bird, but, sometimes you just gotta live on the edge. He clicks Thunder Wave, which means that it's 3 games out of 3 my Corviknight gets Thunder Waved, which is really, really odd. And at this point, he can click Thunder Punch for all he cares. It's not going to do too much. I am a defensive Corviknight, and I get the slow U-turn into my Landorus. Now, Melmetal could stay in or switch out, but he decides to protect and do neither. Now here's an interesting play. So I show U-turn. Of course he knows I have Earthquake. What Lightnerist doesn't have Earthquake, and so he's going to click Save Protect, gets Toxic Chip on me, gets leftovers on him, and that's fair enough on his part. But now he has to predict: am I going to stay in an Earthquake, or am I going to U-turn? Well, I feel like in my experience on the ladder, a lot of times when this interaction occurs, that you click the play you're going to make turn 1, and then turn 2, you decide that, oh well, my opponent's seen that play, now they'll be prepared for it, and so you do the other play turn 2, and they get punished for it. I decided to stick to my guns and click U-turn twice, and that works out for me, because if this goes to Torn, this lets me go back to my Tapu Koko. My Tapu Koko can once again just U-turn out on the Landorus. We've seen at this point that my opponent does know how to switch, and they're going to be doing that, so I shouldn't be predicting at this point for them to try to stay in. Here I'm going to just click Knockoff, because Knockoff is always a fun move to click with Kartana. I do the calc, does not 2-hit KO the Tornadus, which I mean you probably don't have to calc that to know, the 53, and then less than that is not going to kill. So I'm just going to hard switch to Koko. He Heat Waves, predicting me to maybe want to get greedy, which, you know, fair enough. I decide here I'm just going to turn out again, because I don't want to lose offensive momentum against this team. Going to Kartana here, and here is where I decide to Leaf Blade, because I figure, hey, maybe he's going to try to go into Toxapex, or maybe he's going to go into something else to try to take Sacred Sword, or who even knows what I'm going to go for. Leaf Blade is a strong neutral move against basically half of his team, and the other half doesn't necessarily want to try to switch in. As you can see from this Tornadus, yeah, sure, it resists, but not really. And so Leaf Blade is a strong neutral move. But this does mean he can go into Melmetal. I could have predicted this, but I did not predict it. I get a nice little crit there, though, for whatever that's worth. So I'm going to go into Corviknight, because Corviknight can eat Ice Punch, and it can eat all sorts of moves. Double Iron Bash, it can eat, but it's going to get flinched anyway. So it doesn't really eat it. I go into Landorus here, get off the Intimidate, and he Thunder Punches there. So that's cool. Now, here he's going to Protect again. I'm going to click Earthquake to say, hey, I'm not messing around this time, I'm going to Earthquake. But then I figure, okay, there's no way he sacks a very healthy Melmetal, so I am going to U-turn. And so that play actually switched up. And so now, once again, we can just click any move we want. I click Knockoff because I figure, hey, at least I'm going to get leftovers gone on Landorus or on Dragapult. I'm not going to sack my Kartana. I am going to sack my Corviknight, but he Thunder Waves, so I don't even end up sacking it. I can actually go into my Landorus now to get off the Intimidate, which is really useful, because that's basically all Landorus could do at that point. That's not at this point, or Shifu. You can't protect in front of that. I've got Insane Fist, and I'm going to click Close Combat, and this is where the fun starts. So I'm going to make a little bit of a questionable play here, and I'm going to go for the 3 KO, because, he could have clicked Recover here, but instead he decides to click Scald, and he does not get the burn. And now he's going to make an even more questionable play, because instead of going to Dragapult, which would have been safe and free, he decides to sack his Tox Specs. So that's what I mean when I said the low ladder is really weird. Actually, now that I look at it, it says he said this was a misclick, which, okay, we'll believe him. I don't usually have comments enabled during my play, so I didn't even realize that's what he had said off to the side. But apparently that was a misclick. So at this point, we're going to save our Shifu, and he decides to go for Knockoff, which is fair, and it'll be a 2-hit KO onto my Corviknight. But at this point, I can go into my Tapu Koko, change up the terrain, get a free U-turn off, because that'll get, some good chip on the Robum, and it can't Grassy Glide me without his terrain. He decides to go into Landorus, which I guess is fair because I am an electric type, but I feel like, I'm not exactly sure what he should have done in that situation. But even going Melmetal would be more offensively threatening if he thought I was going to stay in. If he thought I was going to switch out, then maybe clicking Knockoff or Grassy Glide would have been a better play. I'm not exactly sure what my opponent should have done there. because now I get to go into Rapid Strike, and he has no switch-ins for Surging Strikes. Rillaboom is not a switch-in. At this point, if you look at my opponent's team, I just said he has no switch-ins, but I don't really feel the need to keep this for Melmetal. And Dragapult is right there. I don't know why they haven't gone Dragapult a single time. And so at this point, oh no, I guess at this point, I actually go into Gloking, which is fair. Okay, so now I click Melmetal, I click Flamethrower on Melmetal because he was Fire Weak. He switches into Fire Weak, and this is already going to resist Sludge Bomb, so that's fine. Okay, here he clicks Thunder Punch, predicting something, I don't know what. Okay, now his Melmetal is low. Alright, now he's going to click Double Iron Bash, which is what I should have done the last turn. Because Double Iron Bash is just really strong on Melmetal, even resisted hits, it hits really hard. And at this point, you click Surging Strikes, everything gets 2-shot by Surging Strikes. And this is the turn I was thinking about before. So it goes Rillaboom. I have no need for this Urshifu anymore. And we're going to click Surging Strikes, predicting him not to click Grassy Glide for whatever reason. I don't know why he didn't. And then he goes into Dragapult. I still don't need this, but we might as well go into Tapu Koko, deny Grassy Terrain. I can keep it for Aqua Jet at the very least, but I go into Kartana and knock off. So that was an okay game. I think the main takeaway from this game is that I was able to keep up offensive momentum against this team. If I had lost momentum too many times, I would have gotten messed up by Melmetal. If he'd have gone into Dragapult more often, I think he also would have been a lot more threatening, which is a big takeaway. Make sure you're using your Dragapult, because look at my team, look at Ghost Resist, I don't have a single one. So I think my opponent should have observed that and played more aggro, because he spent a lot of time pivoting between Landorus and Toxapex and to a lesser extent Melmetal. But those weren't the threats against my team, right? The Dragapult and the Rillaboom and I guess somewhat the Melmetal were the threats, and that was what would have scared my team, but he didn't capitalize on that. Anyway, overall, if we go back to the premise of this team, did the team succeed? Yeah, I didn't miss a single one of my moves. I will say that this isn't the only instantiation that you could have of this kind of team concept. You know, there are other Pokemon like Nidoking who also never miss any of their moves, and maybe at some future point we could try another version of this team with some different mons. But I will also say that this team does have some issues, like it struggles to break stall a lot, and the Landorus set is a little bit janky. I think maybe having a second knockoff user would be better, but it would also weaken Kartana, so for whatever that's worth. And finally, like we said before, there's absolutely no ghost switch-ins on this team, which maybe could be fixed. So now I'm not sure exactly what you'd want to put on there, like what, Hydreigon, that's not a great option. Snorlax, maybe, probably not that. So you'd have to come up with something, but I'm not putting Blissey on this team, that would be really boring. And it would also probably want to run Thunder Wave, which wouldn't fit the team concept, so you'd have to play around with it. Anyway, that's going to be it for today. I'll catch you next time.